This week's tip was inspired by something that I've been doing in my own projects, and I didn't realize it was an issue. Sorry, I'm going to move that a bit. Until I started working on another project. And this is the scarf version of the shawl that I've made. And in it, you can see that I've got 2 rows of, excuse me, sorry, allergy season. 2 rows to make a garter stitch ridge, and I go back to my main color and so on. And in a case like this, I generally am not an advocate of carrying yarn up the side, but where it's just 2 rows, I work to this way and then I work back and my yarn is here. I carry it up, I change color and do the same. And it does make that side look a little different. If I look on it, you can see that I've got these little lines where I have carried the yarn up, but it's pretty imperceptible. On the samples that I knit, it's a little more clear. Now, when you do this, the one thing you want to be careful of is that when you carry the color up, say this rust color up to here where I'm going to use it again, you don't want to pull it too tight, because if you do, what it does is it pulls the yarn from the previous row. And whenever you are bringing up a new color and you're carrying yarn, you want to be sure to bring the new color up behind the old color, and that's going to keep those little lines on the wrong side of the work. Now, the project that made me think about this is one where I am doing the sample for a scarf that's going to be in the winter issue of Cast On. And this clearly does not look like stripes. It's seed stitch, but it is hard to believe. Every time I look at this, I'm amazed at how complex this design looks and how easy it is to do. What it is 3 colors, and you work 1 row in seed stitch, use another color, work another row in seed stitch, and then work another row in seed stitch. And it's important that you don't pull too tightly. Now, what's nice about this particular stitch pattern, and you'll see in a minute when I demo it, is that I am carrying the yarn up both sides. And so it gives this kind of nice little look to the side where it doesn't look like different from each other. Both sides look the same. And again, there's a kind of a wrong way to do this, and that is when you pull too tight. Now, I've got some little samples knit up, and this is one where it's like my shawl. I'm doing 2 rows, changing color, 2 rows, changing color, 2 rows, changing color, and my working yarn is always going to start on the right side. And I'm now ready to use the pink. And so what I do is I bring it up behind and I knit. Now, what I want to do is I do not want to pull that yarn too tight. And if this stitch bothers you a lot, you can just kind of tighten it up to get it out of the way. Sometimes it bothers you. Now, what I'm going to try and do is keep it not too tight, not too loose. And I'll show you in a second where I pulled too tight so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to go here, and because I need to work another row, I'm going to turn and work to the end of the row. Okay. Now, on this row right here, if you notice, I've got these nice little ridge, and then not such a nice little ridge. Looks kind of crappy. What happened is when I went to work this row is I pulled the yarn too tight, and all it did is it pulled the stitches out of that row. Now, if you do that, don't go any further. Stop, look at it, and you can feed the yarn back in. Now, it's way too late for me to do this now because I've already progressed on. But if I still had my working yarn over there, I could manipulate the yarn to fill that out. So let's do 1 row here where I'm going to do that to show you how it happens. I'm going to pull it from behind, and what I like to do is I do like to kind of tighten up that stitch just a little bit so that I can see that I have a nice stitch on the needle. Now, if I didn't do that and I just pulled, you can see it just makes a real mess. And again, what I can do if I haven't gone too far is I can kind of manipulate that. I can find where the yarn should be, and I'd use a tapestry needle to do this, and I would attempt to pull some excess yarn back into those stitches. And you don't want to do this. You can see that this gets very tedious if you have to do it, and so on. Okay, but I can make those stitches look better. But if you get too far past it, no, you can't do that. So there we have it. Now with this other one, I'm working 3 strands of yarn. And I'm not working seed stitch here because it's too hard to see the rows. And why this is kind of neat, if you ever want to do stripes, you can do single row stripes, 2 colors, where, and I have a video on that somewhere earlier if you check the index in my blog. But this is one where you can use 3 colors. And how it works is, I'll demonstrate it first and then we'll talk about pulling too tight. I'm looking at this and my pattern is black, gray, pink. So I know that I'm here and I've got my gray yarn over here. And so it's like working with 2 colors. I'm going to knit that per stitch and I'm not going to pull it too tight. Just going to, sorry for all the sniffing, work to the end. And then when I'm on this side, I need to use pink. Well, luckily, pink is the color that my working yarn that I have here. Because I'm using 3 colors, my working yarn is always going to be where I need it when I'm doing the stripe. Now again, I don't want to pull too tight. If you pull too tight, you're going to do what I did down here when I worked a gray stripe. I pulled too tight and notice there are no gray stitches there. Now again, if I had noticed it at the time, I could have resurrected it, but too late for this one. I would, if this were my real project, I'd just have to rip it out to that point. And you just continue to do this. Now I'm carrying up yarn over 2 rows here, and that is the absolute maximum that I would carry yarn up. For this pattern it works fine, particularly for the scarf that I'm doing where it's seed stitch, because the yarn where I've carried the yarn just becomes part of the pattern. But you can see I have these big long loopy things where I'm carrying that yarn up. And it is very hard to maintain your attention when you carry those yarns a color up more than 2 rows. 2 rows is kind of the max. So that is how you can work with those. Just remember, don't pull the yarn too tight, and look at a row before you go on to check and see if you've pulled it too tight. You can fix it then.